Hi everyone, I'm Brandon Ellis and the author of two sci-fi and fantasy book series, the Starguild Saga and the award-winning Pure Light series. And welcome to my video cast where I interview the best of sci-fi and fantasy. Today I'm interviewing Slade Roberson, who's a writer, professional intuitive counselor, and author of the highly regarded and wicked popular long-running alternative spiritual blog, Shift Your Spirits. He has authored thousands of nonfiction articles and numerous personal development courses, such as Automatic Intuition, Manifest Anything, and The Money Shift. On top of that, Slade is also a very popular fantasy fiction author for books such as Havenwood, Cloud Busting, and The Fairy Killers. He currently lives in Chattanooga, Tennessee, where he often goes fairy scouting in the locations featured in his novels. Hi, Slade. How are you doing?
Good, Brandon. How are you?
Very good. And so, Slade, you're a fantasy writer. However, you started off as a New Age writer. Is that correct?
That's correct. I still am. I have a day job as a New Age and spirituality author for about the last 12 years.
And with that, you created Shift Your Spirits.
Correct. Shift Your Spirits is a blog that's been online for a little over 10 years now.
And how did you come about creating that website? What inspired you, I should ask?
Well, I just had a collection of essays that I'd written for years that were more of a New Age kind of spiritual component, things that were in my journal and stuff. And I'd always been a big consumer of New Age, personal development, self-help kind of books. And at the time, I was actually a web developer and I was developing blogs for people. And I did it as an experiment to see if my skills at list building and audience building and exposure on the web and everything was really up to par. And I thought, well, I'll do this thing that's completely unsalesy. It has this very personal, obscure kind of topic for me, and probably no one will ever see it. And it ended up blowing up in a good way and being like the most successful website that I ever built. So I ditched all my clients and I became my own client. And I started writing Shift Your Spirits for 10 years.
Good for you.
Yeah.
And so with Shift Your Spirits, you also wrote The Money Shift. Is that, yeah, The Money Shift.
Correct.
And that was ranked number 2 in New Age, you told me.
Yeah, when I first put that on Amazon earlier in the year, I've actually been selling it from my website. It's called The Money Shift. By the way, all this nonfiction stuff, Shift Your Spirits, is under my real name, Slade Roberson. My fiction pen name is Eric Slade, just to get that straight. Okay. So I had been selling The Money Shift since like 2007 or something like that. And I just decided, I put it on Amazon. It's not a really expensive product. It had always been my intention to make The Money Shift accessible to people who are having issues with money mindset and abundance. And it kind of annoyed me that people made those kinds of teachings expensive. So I put that on Amazon and it got as high as number 2 in New Age and self-help, New Thought. The only thing I couldn't unseat was The Secret, which has been there for decades. So yeah, it's probably the most popular thing that I put out there.
And you wrote another book, right? It was called...
I have a follow-up to that one called Manifest Anything.
Yes. I love, actually, Manifest Anything. I was staring at the cover. I really love that cover.
Oh, thank you.
It draws you, right? And did you create that cover?
I did not. I have a designer. Her name's Nuri Septina, who does my nonfiction covers.
And your fiction covers also draw people in. Who creates those covers for you?
Andre Batt does my fiction covers. So
you have your nonfiction and then your fantasy. What drew you to fantasy?
Well, that's my first love. I mean, I'm a fantasy reader. I actually gotten the advice from an agent quite a long time ago to build my platform starting with nonfiction because it was a little bit easier to market and easier to build a career around, which was pretty good advice. So my fiction I've kind of brought in just in the last 3 years or so. But I'm definitely a fantasy reader, a science fiction reader, as well as, other things. But those are my first loves since childhood.
Do you have any favorite books in the fantasy genre?
Yeah, probably Jonathan Strange and Mr. Gnarl is my Bible. It's one of my all-time favorites. Huge influence. Old school stuff, of course, Chronicles of Narnia, Tolkien, Dune.
Dune, yeah.
I'm getting into science fiction there a little bit, but The Mists of Avalon is a big one.
Oh, I love Mists of Avalon.
And more recently, The Magicians, Lev Grossman's series.
And now they have a TV show for The Magicians, I believe.
Which is amazingly good, by the way. And it doesn't. You haven't watched it?
No.
Okay, yeah, you need to check that out. It's a really good adaptation. It's one of those rare instances where the adaptation is different than the books, but it's okay. It's kind of its own thing, and they're both equally good, kind of in their format. So. Yeah, it's worth checking out, but read them too.
Okay. And you've written 2 fantasy novels, is that correct?
Correct.
And Havenwood and Cloud Busting.
Right, yes.
And what was your inspiration for those novels?
Cloud Busting was my first novel, and they always say that your first book is like some kind of coming of age, autobiographical sort of thing. It's actually not about me. It's kind of about someone that I knew in college, but I actually had an experience with a girl when I was in college who claimed that she could make it rain. And so that experience of having that conversation with her, which actually featured it raining in a way that kind of blew my mind, always really stuck with me as an image to build a story around. And I had this list of stuff that I had been writing when I was in college. It was like my creative writing class, idea book or whatever. And when I started writing fiction again about 4 years ago, that was the next thing on my list, was to write that story. So I just decided to go for it and write it. I did it for a NaNoWriMo.
Oh, nice. What is Cloud Busting about?
Cloud Busting is about this guy in college who is stuck in the college town where he's going to school during the summer when everybody leaves and goes home. And so he hangs out with this chick who's kind of a eccentric, sort of wealthy Southern belle / train wreck who's got a little bit of a substance abuse issue. And he spends some time hanging out with her because she's kind of his only friend at the time. And she introduces him to this paranormal ability that she has to make it rain, and teaches him how to access that power in himself.
Oh, nice. Yeah. And then there's Havenwood.
Havenwood
is actually, explain to us what that's about.
Okay, so Havenwood's my big one. This is kind of the book that, like when you're a little kid and you're reading Chronicles of Narnia and, Mists of Avalon and stuff like that, and you're like, I want to be a writer when I grow up.
Yeah.
Havenwood was really the first thing that I've ever put out that really felt like I went there to that level. It's an epic 500-page historical fantasy. It's got a little bit of steampunk element to it. It's set in 1915-ish in Chattanooga, Tennessee, which is where I'm from. Mm-hmm. Draws a lot on both, Civil War history as well as Native American lore and fairy lore. And so my whole idea with my fairy world was, growing up, I always felt like all the stories about kids finding doorways into other worlds is always happening to British kids. It's like always somebody, some little kid in the UK. And so as a little kid growing up in the United States, especially in the South, I kind of felt like somehow we didn't have access to that kind of magic in the same kind of way. And so one of the things that, really interested me is I discovered that the Cherokee in particular had a lot of really specific lore around fairies and elves, and it sort of turned me on to the idea that, you know, all the different places in the world can possibly have access to fairies. So I wanted to build a fairy world that was connected to the American South. And along with that came the idea that there was some remnants of kind of the antebellum culture that survived in that other world. So Havenwood is about a woman who immigrates to fairyland, as if it's just a frontier world that you have the potential to move to and start a new life. So she goes there to kind of start a new life and discovers this world that is trapped in a conflict between these kind of, you know, dumbass white human colonists and the kind of elven indigenous peoples that live there that don't want them there. So kind of finds herself in the middle of that.
Oh, that's great. How are you doing with that book? Has it been received?
It's really great. It's still a buzz to have released it and to still have people writing to me. And, you know, sometimes I'll get messages on Facebook from someone who will hit a certain spot in the story and they'll write me about it. You know, they'll respond to it. And it's so cool because you know how it is. You spend years with these worlds in your head, and all of a sudden to have these total strangers excited about something, you know, that has existed only in my mind for so long. It's really a trip. So the reviews are great. I have really good reviews, and I'm currently working on a sequel. I like serialized fantasy and science fiction worlds. I like long story arcs and big books. And so hopefully, if we stay on this trajectory, I can stay in this world for a while and write more stories.
Yeah, with fantasy and science fiction, the worlds are huge, and you have to create vast amounts of pages to convey what you're trying to get across to the reader. When you're writing your world or creating your world, is it more something you're researching, or is it just coming from just as you write? Is it just coming as you write, or is it something that's been in your mind for a long time?
Well, actually, you know, I first started writing this world in 1999, and part of the impetus for the "why can't it be in America" thing was the Harry Potter, you know, phenomenon, which I didn't mention earlier. Of course, I love those books as well, but that brought back around that whole idea of like, why's it got to be England? So, so I kind of started working on the world back then, and I wrote a series of books that were kind of more young adult fantasy that take place in a contemporary time in that world. So I basically had this world in my head and somewhat in print, but it never saw the light of day. And so a few years ago, I was really kind of mourning the fact that I hadn't brought that world to the public. You know, it was something that I've spent the most amount of time developing, and I really love it. I think it's deep and intricate and layered, and I've had a lot of time to play with it and think about it. So I decided to, I wanted, rather than going back to the stories that I had been struggling to write, I decided to write something fresh in that world that I could just start from scratch. And so I went back in time 100 years and kind of started writing about the events that lead up to the present time. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, I think it did. Another question popped up when you were talking, and have you had experiences like walking through the forest or traveling anywhere where, I don't know, you see like fairies, or is that a world that you only think is in the book or in novels?
There's a lot of real world inspiration, I will tell you that. And I've had a lot of really cool kind of synchronicities happen even since I started writing this book. I had been seeing these trees in the woods for a long time that were very irregularly shaped, and in some cases looked like they had been trained to be sort of they had 90-degree angles in their branches and things like that. And that was one of those early kind of inspirations for, some of these things that I would see in the forest that would inspire fairy lore in my head. And I only recently found out, actually, as I was about halfway through writing Havenwood, that the Native Americans had a system of kind of highway signage that were called signal trees or sign trees, and that some of these trees that I may be seeing have been like the equivalent of, interstate whatever kind of signs that you see on the highway.
They did that.
They used them to navigate in the woods. So there's some very real places here in Chattanooga. There's a lot of history here and a lot of cool places to hike and, a lot of mountains and stuff. And I try to make sure that the places that I put in my book are actual real places that you could come to and track down if you were really nerding out on the details of the book and you wanted to go and see some of these places. They do exist. So I definitely take the inspiration from real life. Again, I also met someone one time who told me about a place where he had seen evidence of fairy beings, and that was one of the earliest inspirations for the whole thing.
That's amazing. So a little bit off topic. Did you grow up in Chattanooga, Tennessee?
I grew up in Knoxville and Chattanooga, so all East Tennessee, the Appalachians, the Smoky Mountains. So definitely most of my childhood in this area.
Did you go to high school in Chattanooga?
I did, yes.
Okay, I have to ask you this because an ex-girlfriend of mine, she grew up in Chattanooga.
Okay.
She's still there. She's there now. She came to Portland where I live for about 10 years. And that's where I met her. And do you know Claire Mills?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay. Didn't know if you guys went to high school together.
Are you still friends with her, like on Facebook and stuff?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we still talk all the time.
Okay.
So.
You should tell her to look me up.
Okay. Yeah, she took me to, I think it's Lookout Mountain.
Yeah. That's where my book is set, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I lived up there myself for a while. You've probably heard of like Ruby Falls and Rock City. So the road between those sites is called Scenic Highway, and the main house that exists in Chattanooga in Havenwood, kind of where the book starts, is based on I used to live in the carriage house behind this enormous old manor house mansion that was the inspiration for the house in my book. And that's on Lookout Mountain. So it's really cool to live up there because the entire place is kind of state park land. So they don't really build, like convenience stores and crap like that up there. So you literally walk out of your door and there's like boulders and vines and, Civil War cannonballs petrified in the side of the hill. It's a very cool place to live.
Yeah, there's also, I think, I went there, I forget what it's called, but it's like is it a national forest there you can walk through and all that stuff? It was on Lookout Mountain. I don't know if I'm even saying it right. It was near where that train goes straight down the
incline.
Yeah, the incline.
Yeah.
But anyway.
That's all right there, man. If you read my book, you'll get to revisit it all.
Please. Your characters, where do you get their personalities?
Wow, where do I get my characters' personalities? Some of them were kind of intentional. Like, I wrote this book. Another reason why I chose to work on this project was when I wrote Cloud Busting, I had a main female character, but the storyteller, the narrator, was male, and it still was very much from kind of a male perspective. And when I was looking at what project I wanted to really dive into, I started talking to a lot of my readers, and my nonfiction reading world is pretty big. So it's easy for me to survey some of those people who have come across to read my fiction, and they're predominantly women. So I realized that, going forward, I needed to kind of keep that in mind a little bit more than I had on the previous book. I kind of wrote that for myself. Whereas this book, I talked to a lot of my readers that I've gotten to know over the years who I know are either authors or they are really into reading themselves. They're book nerds. And I asked them a lot of questions about what they like to read. And I kind of came up with this shelf, this virtual bookshelf that they shared with me. And that was an overlap. And I tried to create like a book that was missing from that shelf. You know what I mean? Like it would go on there. And so I wanted to start with definitely a strong female protagonist. And I wanted her to not be cliche. And I wanted her to be kind of ahead of her time, but also in a realistic way, not in necessarily like a superhero kind of way. So she's deeply flawed, but she's kind of cool.
Yes.
And as you probably know, during the writing of the book, there were other characters that I kind of thought were just going to be on the page for a minute that started to really take on a life of their own. And I had a supporting character who was a female character that I kind of just put in as a placeholder character, and she ended up growing and growing and growing. And all the feedback that I get from Havenwood is that she's everyone's favorite character. So made her the star of the sequel. So I've been kind of writing these characters both with my readers in mind. Like I want to mirror their personalities in some way, and give them someone that they can really relate to. But then also like let this kind of magical channeling happen where these characters just sort of come in on their own, and
you just allow them to come in and do what they need to do.
The ones that are the most interesting usually show up that way.
Yeah.
The ones that I work on the most aren't necessarily better for it. You know what I mean? So it's kind of cool. I think it's something kind of supernatural, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, I do too. What are you working on right now?
I'm working on a book called The Greycoat's Daughter, which is the sequel to Havenwood. And it is features one of the kind of supporting cast members from the first book in a more predominant role. Okay. Since she was everybody's hero, I kind of fell in love with her a little bit too. So I wanted to write a book about her.
Okay. Last question.
Yeah.
What do you want your readers to get out of your books?
Deep, delicious escapism. I love big books, and I love to spend like a month immersed in a story world, and look forward to going there every night before I go to bed. So I guess I want that emotion for everybody who's into that experience. I want them to have that.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me and for talking about my books. I'm excited.
I first started out with fantasy, and now I'm kind of delving more into sci-fi fantasy because I've always have to have the magic in there. Anyway.
Did you ever read Julian May? Any Julian May?
I've never heard of Julian May.
Okay, I'll send you some links. But earlier I would have mentioned her if I thought about it. But one of my big loves, like, when I was a teenager, she wrote this story world that was like a perfectly straddled fantasy and sci-fi at the same time. You know what I mean? Yeah. Which was really amazing. She kind of, and you kind of do this a little bit in your fiction as well, from what I understand. But what she did was she took like this kind of science fiction story world and used it as a way to explain mythology. So it's kind of an ancient aliens concept, like a concept that all the, mythical legends that we have about all these various, creatures and demigods and all this kind of stuff are all because they were an alien race that, lived here millions of years ago or whatever. So she has like this, set of 4 books, like set, in one part of that universe. And then she has a trilogy, and then she has another trilogy. And it's
that would be fabulous.
Yeah. I'm gonna send you the link to that, because that's one of those like worlds, like I was talking about, where it's like this really big, well-developed serialized thing that spans multiple series and stuff, which I think you might kind of get into. By the way, I've been meaning to tell you that I'm reading your books. I picked it up 2 or 3 days ago, episode 0. I guess that's the part, right?
Yeah.
It sounded like it. But I'm into it. And you know what?
Oh, thank you.
I'm jealous because there's a part of me that would love to write like military sci-fi because I read a lot of that kind of stuff. I'm living vicariously through your sci-fi military
Cool.
stuff because I'm definitely a fan of that kind of stuff. And I have to say that I'm really genuinely loving reading your book.
Oh, good. Thank you.
You know, sometimes when you meet people, it's hard to like, you know, even though you want to read their books because you know them personally, like I never put that pressure on anyone because it's just, you know, sometimes it can be hard when somebody gives you a book and you're like, oh man, this is really hard to read. Like, I'm not into it. So I've got like a new policy, like I'm not going to tell anyone until after I read their book and then be like, oh yeah, I read your book. It was good. But I'm into your book. I'm about like 80% through that first one. And I'm definitely digging it. So I'm going to keep going.
What's really interesting with it is I used the mythology of the Anunnaki. I don't know if you know what they are.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
But at the same time, I was an Anthony Robbins. I used to work for Anthony Robbins, Tony Robbins, who's like one of my favorite people to listen to. And so I've got some of that technology, the strategies of manifesting things, all that stuff that he teaches in it. And more importantly, I think, is I have one of my best friends has had a near-death experience.
Oh, wow.
And she went up the tunnel and she was told she can ask anything, and she said, anything? And they said, yeah. So she felt like she was up there for years when it was just a couple minutes. Nonetheless, she was told about the Anunnaki. She was told about our like sacred geometry. She was told about our ancient past, all that stuff. So it's all tied in that book. Also tied in my Pure Lights book too.
Yeah.
So it's pretty interesting. So when people know about that, they tend to be a little bit more interested in reading it and taking more of it in, because a lot of it, I should say, is for information. So it's kind of cool.
Really? Well, that's super cool. Well, God, man, I could talk to you about this stuff forever. First of all, number one, I could like exchange like book suggestions with you till the end of time. And that was one of the first things I got from when I first met you. And I was hanging out with you at the mixer. I was like, oh, this is cool. Like these guys, like we can, you know, share book recommendations forever.
Yeah.
And it was weird because you really were one of the first people there that I kind of clicked with, you know, and like sat down next to and hung out with and felt really comfortable with. So it's not a surprise to me that we're here having this conversation now, you know, and that we've done this like promo thing and together and everything. But yeah, I'm really like, I'm sitting here thinking like, okay, I want to have you on my podcast to talk about books that you love. And then I also want to have you on something that's more related to the spiritual stuff that I do to talk about that stuff.
That would be fun. I actually have more interest in that.
Do you?
The spiritual aspect of everything. Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, it's definitely, I got to create an opportunity to talk to you about that stuff and about what this woman brought back, you know, in terms of like her messages and everything. I think people really eat that up.
Yeah, they do. I've been interviewed 3 times about 6 times. There's these kind of like spiritual podcasts that people do. They're not very popular, but for some reason my name got out because of the Pure Light series, that won an award that I did. And so it's very spiritual, and it's a lot of it's based on do you know Lemuria? Yeah. A lot of it's based on that, their kind of thinking, as was explained to me from my near-death experience. I don't remember anything back then in Lemuria or whatever, but it's pretty interesting. So I would love to talk to you about all that, and I would love to be on, you know, talk about my books and stuff and whatever. Yeah. No, I think this is really cool that you're doing this. I mean, I've wanted to do a podcast forever, and I'm just kind of a procrastinator because the technology is a little bit more production. I think after we do it for a while, you know, we'll probably get our thing down, but I've been doing this writing for 10 years. So it's like I've got it down, you know what I mean? It's like, so slipped away in the corner of my schedule. And, I'm like, oh man, I gotta like
I got to do something new and stretch myself a little bit. But like you were talking about your computer being slow, like I desperately need a new laptop.
Oh yeah.
Doing that.
So we got to start selling these books so we can buy all this stuff we need.
I know, right?
To get our message out.
I'm really freaking thrilled about how many people have signed up to my list. I mean, I officially doubled my email list, which was tiny.
Yeah.
But even,
I've done exactly the same, doubled it. Yeah.
You doubled it?
Yeah.
It's so cool. And I mean, I threw Shanta like $20 just to throw in with some ads or whatever.
Oh, that was nice of you. Yeah, we weren't getting very many people doing that.
Well, I mean, I did it kind of as an energetic thing because I felt like she was doing a lot of work and you were doing a lot of work and I was just, along for the ride. So that was one way I could contribute. But, and, the thing is like, I could have spent 5 times that amount of money on Facebook ads by myself this month and gotten like a trickle.
Yeah.
And it was like a flood. So whatever we did was super effective. and
we've got a lot more stuff, a lot more ideas that we're going to do. And
really,
she wants to include you in it, like as one of the main people.
I'd love to.
She emailed me, is you and somebody else. And she even wants to start a mastermind kind of fiction authors, not just, because apparently I didn't know this going into fiction. It's a lot easier and you would probably know it, and I think you touched up on it a little bit in the interview, but it's a little bit easier to sell nonfiction than fiction. Is that correct?
Yeah, it really is. And it's because of all the, the metadata and keyword stuff is so kind of built for, talking about specific things. So when you think about it, like, when you want to know how to do something like, how do I, channel my spirit guides or whatever, you can type that into Google and you're going to end up on, my website or whatever really easily. Or if you go onto Amazon and you type in something like, manifests abundance, you're going to land on my books just because of the topics and the keyword kind of aspect of it. But when it comes to fiction, it's such a like subtly layered kind of thing. I mean, you could search for specific genres, but that's still kind of not quite the same as being able to like land on an actual title. You know what I mean? So it's a slippery thing selling this fiction. And I have to say, like, the Money Shift I wrote in 3 days, like my best selling thing ever. And then, I work on
written. Like you're a really good writer.
Thank you. You are as well.
I don't feel like I am.
Well, let me tell you what you do right.
So like my Pure Light series, I was shocked it won an award because I thought it was poorly written. I thought I didn't, but I
haven't read that book yet, but I will say this. There's something that I kind of notice, especially in more amateur writers, that, there's certain kind of telltale signs people give away when they're like kind of not maybe as slick or professional or whatever. And one of the things that really gives that away for me is how people handle dialogue. And I like to write dialogue. I feel like I
love it.
One of my strengths, and your dialogue, and in particular, the way you write the stage action for the dialogue, is really elevated and smart. And
good.
It says to me that like you think about how to render dialogue and scenes with people talking in a way that's not, you don't use a lot of cheesy action phrases like he inquired, poetically or whatever, like all that stuff that's so self-conscious, it like jars you when you read it. You have a lot of like really, you have these scenes where they're almost like teleplays. They're very, conversation heavy. Like when the dude goes to talk to the admiral in the office and get chewed out, and it's kind of just them back and forth. But the places where you use action to describe like what that person's doing in the room, like what their facial expressions are, what kind of, what do they do with their hands, that kind of stuff. It's really minimally done in a way that makes me think that you're a really good writer.
Oh,
like
cool.
That's one of your strengths for sure, in my opinion. And it's one of the things that sucked me into reading your book because like, I feel like, this person knows what he's doing. Like I'm not struggling here at all.
Good.
Yeah, I'm into it.
Yeah, thank you very, very much. I really appreciate that.
So how's your books doing since the summit?
Better than ever. And
Good.
I've, a, a, oh, man, I can't talk. One of the most successful authors that I know told me that once he started getting his subscriptions up, he said he just focused on subscribers instead of his sales. And when he focused on subscribers, his sales just started slowly going up and up and up.
Yeah.
And so that's what I decided to do. And that's been happening. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not definitely not like in the, I would love to be like top 1,000 author. Heck, love to be a top 100 author. I'm not even close to that. I'm probably mid 50s and mid 30s. Sometimes, in the rankings, not in the author rankings, but when I'm
Yeah.
looking at my book sales.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of mostly around 45,000 rankings. Then every so often I'll look and I'll be at like 250. I'm like, what? And then the next day I'll look and I'll be like low again. So it's really interesting.
I know this from my experience. Like I said, I've been doing this for 10 years, 12 years. I built this huge nonfiction list. It's like over 20,000 people that have been following that blog over the years. When I had 1,000 people, it was enough for me to basically make a part-time income off of, it was like enough. But, and of course, the thing that's so crazy is you have this huge number, and then the amount of people that open it is like not everyone. And then the amount of people that actually click through on something, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So, I went into building this fiction list. Like, first thing that I did was, who can come over from the big list? Like, who among the people that are already in my list can I seed my fiction list with? Well, I can tell you it was very disappointingly small.
Oh, no.
It's like the number of people that came over to read fiction from my nonfiction was not a lot. I had like less than 400 people on that list launching Havenwood. And it was a good launch. I mean, it went well. A lot of people were excited about it, sharing it and talking about it. And it was, other than the money shift, my most successful like Amazon launch for sure. But I already knew going into the long game of, I need more people to launch these books to, because at the end of the day, the people who are reading Havenwood for the most part are people who know me, and I have told them to go read my book.
Yeah.
And so the amount of people that I can just get to know who I am, I kind of hit the wall. And when I came back from the bestseller summit, I was telling one of the other people that I met there, not necessarily you, but I was like, I need to find a way to introduce myself to people who've never heard of me before. Like, that's the big thing. I need to find audience somewhere that, like, I can't just rely anymore on who I can personally reach who's already heard of me. I feel like I've kind of run through those people. And so this promo did that. I mean, it doubled that number, and I would have been like thrilled if I got 50 people out of it or something, But I do think that just, the bigger that you can get that number, you need a large quantity in order to have room for it to come down through, who opens, who's paying attention, who actually buys the book. So the bigger you can get that base number to start with, the better off you're going to be. And I'll tell you this too, because not a lot of people have this kind of figure, but over time, I've looked at the amount of time that somebody stayed on my nonfiction list before they bought something of mine, and it was like 9 months.
Wow.
It wasn't right away. It wasn't the day they found my website. It was getting on my list, reading a post from me every week religiously on Sunday over and over and over again for 6 months, 9 months. And then they'd be like, oh man, I'm going to buy some of this stuff. So that's the mindset that I'm going into the fiction with. Like, I feel like, well, so what's the fiction version of that,
So when I was talking to Tim Grahl, he told me when I want to launch my next book, which I'm going to finish the trilogy before I even launch the first book.
That's a good idea.
And so it's going to take me a little bit of a while.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, he said, at 10,000 readers, 10,000 subscribers, you're going to get a great response when you launch your next book. He says, try to hold, he wanted me to kind of, not necessarily tell me try to hold off. He said it'd be a good idea to hold off until then. So I'm going to attempt to, that's my goal. I have it all over my laptop here, 10,000, 10,000, 10,000. So,
yeah.
So anyway.
Well, I mean, my goal from the, at the summit, you remember we had to quantify our goals, like write it down, what are you building up to? What's your next list? Well, 1,000 was my thing to hit. So today I'm 760 something or something like that, which is huge. I mean, it's so funny, how excited I am about this tiny number of fiction readers when I've got this huge list of nonfiction readers. But this one excites me so much more because it's been harder to build, but it's also so much more connected to my heart. You know what I mean? It feels different having people connect with the fiction.
Yeah. And you know how he told us to take a picture of our number and put it on our, mine's 1,000. I'm just like you, I'm almost there. I think I have, 847 or something like that. But I had, before I went to the summit, I had, I think, about 200 on my list. And then I started hitting I got this, everybody told me not to do it, but I did it. They're saying don't do Mark Dawson. Do you know Mark Dawson, his Facebook ads? I
did do that course last year.
Yeah, I did his course, and I was iffy about it, and I said, oh, screw it, I'm going to do it. I was getting about 100 people a month off of it, but it cost me
That's what I'm saying.
It cost me an arm and a leg.
That's what I was saying. If you compare what I would have had to spend in Facebook ads by myself this month to get 50 people, and you compare that to the 300 people that we got from doing this Insta freebie group thing, I'm like, man, we got to do this over and over again. I mean, we got to, do stuff because for some reason, and that's the magic of, I had a really profound sense of needing to be at that summit. And, I think about the people that I did connect with there, and just the result, if all it was, having this whole thing that happened with you and Shanta, that was priceless. It's it really is a synergy of people, and it's really cool that, because you try all these things, like you said, they're so expensive and they work, but they work a little bit. And so this past week has been a blast checking those stats. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, would you be interested in joining Shanta and I?
Yes. God, yeah.
Okay, cool. I'll tell her that. And I got to tell you this really quick before we go. So the Bestseller Summit, I've been wanting to go to ever since I heard about it. Mm-hmm. And I had retired I'm a sports therapist, which simply means I do massage and physical therapy and osteopathy, that kind of thing. Right. I retired 6 months ago from it to focus full time on my writing, because that's my passion. I've been wanting to do that since I was a kid.
Yeah.
And so I did not have any money to go to the Bestseller Summit, get a ticket, stay, somewhere. And literally the day of, the last day the tickets were going out, or the last day of the ticket, my dad emails me. He said, I got this email. My dad lives in a different state. He goes, I got this email from this Tim Grawl guy. How did I get this email? I'm like, I have no idea. Because my dad's in lighting. He's a lighting salesperson. He goes, what do you think about doing this? And I go, I've been wanting to. He goes, how about I pay for the ticket, and if you can find your way there, that's great. If not, maybe I can get reimbursed. I'm like, okay. So he buys me the ticket. I send a shout out on Facebook, and the guy who taught me sports massage says, oh, I have 52,000 free air miles. How about that? I'm like, yeah. And then I put another shout out on Facebook. Kenny Chesney, you know the singer?
Yeah.
Kenny Chesney and Leanne Rimes, they're a massage therapist who does very well. he somehow saw my post, and he said, I have a place here, a really nice place, by the way. Do you want to stay here for free? You can sleep in my extra, and I'm like, yeah. So I got to go to the summit, other than paying for food and stuff like that during the time that I was there, for practically free. It was amazing to me.
Oh my God. I kind of had something similar happen because I really wanted to go to it. And I took Tim's course back in the summer, and I had written him once before and asked him, some kind of questions here or there or whatever. But I kept seeing the stuff about the summit, and I was like, oh, I really just couldn't afford to do it. I had just put out this book. So all the money that I spent on editing and cover and all that, I had a whole lot of overhead out for the year. And I really wanted to go, though. It like hurt my heart to think about it. And it's so close to me, it's like a 2-hour drive. And I emailed him out of the blue and was just like, basically asked if there was anything that I could do to like help them out in exchange for something or whatever. And he immediately responded and said, oh my God, I'm just sending out an email with a request for, volunteers to help my wife. And I said, I'd totally do it. I live really close by and I can come on a, drop of a hat. And several days went by, and then I got an email from Candace, and she was like, yeah, if you'll come and like help me out for a day, then you can have a ticket to the event. And I was like, no way. And so it just cost me like, I got what do you call it? An Airbnb for like $50 a night. And yeah, I got to come for very little money. I mean, I definitely think it was worth the money that people spent. Yes. And I will, definitely try to go again, but it's really cool that happened to you, because I felt like the universe like conspired to put me there.
Yeah, me too, because I was so bummed I wasn't going to go. And I thought me putting it out to the universe that I'm going. I thought that, okay, I'm not supposed to go. The last day of the tickets, my dad gets this email. It was just amazing. So
that's really cool.
And it's just so weird. Why would my dad get it? So anyway.
That's awesome, man. Yeah. Well, let's talk again, and definitely tell Shanta I'm down for whatever you guys want to do. I mean, it's such a cool group of people, and it doesn't feel forced at all. It's like the literally the most effortless, like magical kind of networking, I mean, it's just like, you're just people that I met at this really cool event, and yet somehow we did this thing and it actually worked. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
it worked better than you thought, and that's great. I was hoping Wednesday when we did the Thunderclap promo and the Insta promo, I was actually thinking, okay, we're going to get thousands, but that didn't happen.
Yeah, that part of it was like, okay, well, that was a learning experience. But I got to tell you, I mean, just that first day blew my mind.
That blew my mind too. I didn't expect that.
No, not at all. All right, man.
All right, have a great night. Or yeah, it's probably night for you now.
It's like 5.
Oh, 5. Yeah, it's really good. All right, well, have a great one.
Yeah, awesome talk to you.
Yeah. Okay.
See you soon. Bye.